Hello, welcome to another episode of Tiny Nest. I'm Kiva.
And I'm Jake. This series is following our tiny house project from the early stages through to completion and beyond.
This episode shows how we installed our window trim.
Alright, I'm ready to show you guys installing a set of trim around a window. And they've got the one coat of paint on them, but some of them got a bit of dirt and stuff on them when they were drying, so I'm just really lightly going over sandpaper to sort of clean them up. And then we'll go install them, and we'll do the final coat of paint after.
Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is measure and mark the center over the window, and then measure and mark the center of the piece so that I can line up the two marks and get it centered over the window. I'm going to do the top and the bottom pieces first, so I'm going to pre-drill them for the screws. And this is so that the screws can be sunken down, and I can also get the screw partway in without it biting the piece and affecting where the piece is positioned. I just want to bite into the house and have the piece sort of able to shift around for settling it in its final position. The position of the pre-drilled hole is important because there's a flange around the whole window that protrudes about 1.25 inches, I think. And if I were to drill through the trim in the middle, it would end up hitting the flange. And I'm just showing on the bottom because it's easy, but it's even more important elsewhere because I'd be puncturing through the membrane and through the flange, and there's caulking in behind there. So I want to stay away from that wherever possible. So all the pieces are like this, but just to show the bottom piece, I've drilled down low so that the screw is going to come through and stay away from the flange. I also don't want any of the pieces of trim to be tight, like touching the window. I prefer to have a bit of a gap so that there's no water getting stuck between, you know, two things tight to each other. So anyway, I'm putting these little pieces of the rain screen actually were made good spacers to help me position the piece initially. And then once I've got it where I like it, I'm just putting a little bit of a pilot hole through the house. And this is puncturing the membrane, and I can see it coming off of my drill bit. But the drill bit that I'm using is narrower than the screw that I'm using, so it should still stay tight against the screw once it's through, so it shouldn't really compromise the seal. Pre-drilling into the house helps guide the screw as it goes in. Without a pre-drilled hole, the tip of the screw, if it didn't bite perfectly right away, might either push the piece out or end up biting in slightly off of where I want it. But if I've got a hole already there, made exactly in line with where I'm holding the piece in preparation, that point of the screw is going to go right into that little hole that I've started, and then when the threads of the screw bite, it's just going to pull the screw all the way in, and it's not going to be pushing the piece back or having some kind of negative effect. So you can see how easy the screw went in there. I screwed the screws in just before the head made contact with the piece so that it's still a little bit loose. And I should have showed you up there, but I'll just show you down here. The concept applies to all the pieces. The flange is stood off at least about 1/16 of an inch in thickness off of the face of the sheathing. So rather than the piece having a nice flat surface to sit against, it's got kind of half and half. It's half on the flange and half kind of floating, so you end up getting a point for it to rock on. So what I'm going to do is, before I tighten it down, I'm going to wedge some shims to take up the space that's left on the part that's overhanging the flange, so that it's solid, and when I screw down, it's not getting pulled into what would be a gap where there's no flange. Alright, the bottom pieces we made 1/4 inch wider than the window, so we have just 1/8 of an inch on each side, which will, as you'll see, produce a bit of a gap between the side pieces and the window. So all I have to do to center this is look at the two sides and make sure that I've got roughly the same amount protruding on both sides. I'm just going to hold it in place and basically do the same procedure. Okay, with those in, before I get carried away and before I pre-drill these, I like to had a bit of an issue with one, so I like to check them ahead of time and make sure that they're the same length so that there isn't some weird lopsided thing going on. And actually, these are slightly different. There could be something irregular going on, so I'm going to see if there's another one that's a bit more, that matches a bit better. Alright, that's a bit better, and just because this is the front of the house, being a bit more particular about it. So these are good. So I'm just going to look and pick. These are nice because you can basically pick whichever face looks better. And then I'll pre-drill the correct sides, because again I'm going to drill off to one side so that it misses the flange here. And then I'll basically do the same procedure again. And so, like I mentioned before, I'm sinking all the screws in, and we're going to fill that little divot in and then paint over it so you won't be able to see it. But the screws are nice as opposed to nails because these are quite thick pieces. We'd need really long nails, and also it's a bit tough to get it just right, especially because we're making these pieces ourselves. So having the ability to screw where you have a bit more control, even after, if you need it to tweak one way, you could change the shim and suck it down a bit more and it'll shift. So we just decided to go with screws as opposed to nails, but of course it adds that step of covering it after. But we used some white paintable caulking on the first few we did, and it was pretty hard to fill the hole nice and flat. So I think we're going to try some wood filler, and we'll let you know which of those works better. Okay, got all the pieces on, and now I just need to get the shims, cut the shims out of the way. So I'm just using a razor knife, scoring it a few times, and then snapping it off. So I'll do that on all of them, and of course I'm being careful, trying not to slice the membrane that we've got on here. And there you have it. It took us a couple windows to fine-tune the process that I just demonstrated, but we've been using that since, and it's going pretty well. And it looks like it's going to work. The intention of the design was that, starting from top to bottom, this piece is going to be proud of the siding, so any water trickling down the siding will get onto this, come out away from the house, and then collect against this edge, which is proud of the window, so it should just drip off. And then anything coming down here, this is proud of the window, and it's also proud of the siding, so it should just drip. The water should come away and drip off. That was the whole idea, is to kind of let water run away from things and then have a place to drip down. Nowhere will it drip back in or collect inside somewhere. There's always a place for it to come out.
We were initially going to build our own corner pieces for the tiny house, but we stumbled across these and they ended up working out really perfectly for us. They fit right on the corners and overlap a little bit on the rain screen strips that we already had installed on both sides, and they fit underneath the fascia board at the top. So we're just going to butt the siding up against it when we come to that point, and yeah, here is us installing one.
Because there'll be a space underneath the corner piece once it's installed, we've got the bug screen at the bottom installed already, and then on the top of the piece we're going to staple on a little square bug screen like that, so that when we push it against the corner and slide it up underneath the fascia, there'll be some a barrier up at the top as well. We're also following the same screw sinking procedure. So once we get into place, I'm going to pre-drill with a drill and then have the screw just suck the piece down and then sink the screw in so that we can cover it up and paint it for a finished look. We also double checked that the framing inside will accept the full length of the screw right into some good wood in there. Also, you might notice we left it really long on the bottom just because we're still working out where the siding is going to come down to. So we'll just trim it off at the end once we've got it all sorted out. Sort of just clean up everything. The fender trim pieces to install are pretty easy because it's just a flat surface. It'll fit tight against it with no need for shims or anything. But there is that metal flashing that's part of the trailer that's behind the sheathing. So I had to drill really high up to make sure that I was going high enough to miss it. On the other side, I actually totally forgot about that and hit it with the reverse screw. So I had to sort of mess around to get that to work, but knowing it on this side, it was really easy. And then the pieces on the sides, I'm just meeting up and keep maintaining the gap. I have some spacers in here, kind of wedged, but it's just pieces of the rain screen I put so that it was stood off of the fender, and then it's the right length so that these pieces will maintain an equal gap around the whole thing.
We've switched to using the wood filler for our sunken in holes instead of the caulking. And then after it's dried, we just sand it down. It makes a nice smooth finish, way better than the caulking.
One of the last steps in finishing off the work on the trim before we put the siding up is that I've gone around and put a bead of caulking on all the top pieces of trim where it meets the house, just so that if there's moisture back there, it's not going to seep into that little seam that there is between the piece and the wall. And I thought I'd just show you this one because it's down nice and low, but just a very simple bead, like so. And then a nice smooth finish so that water could roll off if it needed to.
If you want to see some of our previous videos, click on the preview tiles. And subscribe if you want to follow our progress.